Welcome back to the Philosophy for Philistines channel on this 29th of April. Since the channel is dedicated to taking complex issues and breaking them down so that the lay person can understand, today's topic is going to be deep, but it's one that we need to delve into, and I will do my very best to simplify complex philosophical and psychological ideas so that the average person can understand them. I'm going to begin with a story. I will begin with this following story since it is perhaps the earliest one from my frame of reference that I am able to talk about a very peculiar phenomenon in postmodern society, namely the war being waged on femininity by postmodern feminists. And I apologize to Anna Siri ahead of time, but it is impossible for me to speak on this topic without referencing her. My wife is one of the first two women in Norway to graduate from FHS Sjøkrigsskolen in Bergen, which is Norway's Naval Academy. Her career in the Navy and the Coast Guard was indicative of how a radical socialist society, which was engaging in social engineering, was attempting to prove that men and women were identical in both nature and interests. Anna Siri's experiment failed the moment she gave birth to her first child, at which time she was forced to resign her duties, or I should say, when she went to report back to duty at the end of her maternity leave. At the time, she held the pay grade of commander, or Örlogskaptein, with years of distinguished service in both the Navy and the Coast Guard. After her maternity leave, she reported back to headquarters and was ordered to go north to Bodø, which lies within the Arctic Circle, even though she had a small baby. Obviously, it was a setup due to the fact that since she could produce a child, she had proven she wasn't a man. Her commanding officers knew that she wasn't about to allow the demands of the military to interfere with mothering her little boy. This is why society, writ large, suffers from FBR syndrome, and the underlying reason for this is cultural Marxist critical theory, which is attempting to both pervert and negate human nature itself. Our very nature reveals itself in our collective unconscious through archetypal images and stories, which are repeated cross-culturally throughout the world. These archetypes, we have archetypes which define the good king or the guiding father. The Arthurian legend is one such example. Edward the Confessor is yet another. But what is the tyrant archetype? The archetypal tyrant is convinced that they are the center of the universe, that everything and everyone within it can and should revolve around them. They are possessed with an unwavering belief that they know better than anyone else, that others should follow them, obey their instructions, and do as they do. This belief gives them an air of self-righteousness, overconfidence, and arrogance, but also a charisma which is capable of making them appealing to those who agree with and are willing to buy in to their way of thinking. The 20th century provided us with more than sufficient examples of such, which invariably resulted in war, murder, and oppression. The female archetypes likewise have two faces. Here in the West, the good mother archetype is represented by the Virgin Mary. But how does her opposite manifest itself? The wicked witch who invites children into her gingerbread house so that she can fatten them up to consume them. And for the first time in modern history, we are witnessing the manifestation of the evil mother in the postmodern state. It has become a tyrannical, enabling tool of codependency and feminized authoritarianism, which is creating weak adults incapable of caring for themselves properly. Since we live in an all-pervading welfare state which reaches into every corner of our private life in order to control and manipulate and to render normalcy a hate crime, and by corrupting our very human nature. In this situation, we see the state waging war on human nature to the point where the perverse, eatable mother denies the evolutionary biology of the binary nature of our humanity in order to corrupt what it means to be male and female. So welcome to the animus-possessed society, what we might refer to as historically as the very first manifestation of a totalitarian feminist social order. Now, the anima and the animus refer to the nature that we have within ourselves that we learn from the parent of the opposite sex. So a man has a feminine nature, which is the anima, that he learns from his mother, and a dysfunctional relationship with the mother will result in anima possession. Likewise, the female has an animus, which she learns from her relationship with the father. An animus possession manifests itself in certain particular ways as well. So now we're going to discuss anima and animus and how to balance the divine feminine with the masculine. This is from an article by Alethea Lunam, dated February the 28th, 2022. I provide the link. So this is referred to, it's a wonderful archetype in the Anishinaabe culture, that women are to tend to the water and men are to attend the fire. When I was invited to a sacred ceremony, I had to build the fire, and that fire pit cannot ever have anything cooked in it, and it has to be made with granite stones, which they view as the manifestation of their ancestors. So water and fire refer to the anima and the animus. There is a reason why this simple yet beautiful from Walt Whitman. As Walt Whitman once wrote, "I am large, I contain multitudes." There is a reason why this simple yet beautiful verse has reverberated across history. It contains immense truth. We all contain multitudes. We are all divine, all a divine amalgamation of water and fire, soul and spirit, yin and yang. Ultimately, when we narrow everything down within us, we see that we contain two energies, that of the feminine and of the masculine. In psychology, these two polar opposite forces are known as the anima and animus. And learning to connect with, explore, and balance each of those inner forces is crucial for our well-being. In this article, we explore why. What is the anima and the animus? The anima is by far the most difficult archetype to deal with in the male psyche. Jung called it the heroic feat to move into the unconscious and return with a meaningful yet healthy connection to this archetype. It is the thing that gives mystery to a man's existence. It is the divine feminine. It's the thing that causes to look with wonder upon a great piece of art, great architecture, and great music. It should come as no surprise, then, that the anima is perhaps more behind more neuroses than even the archetype of the shadow. Possession by the anima merely means the autonomous character of the archetype has seized control of the part that part of the conscious self, that individuals who will do and say things as enforced by the anima. The action of the anima in this sense is so fast that it takes an individual of highly developed inner sensitivity to even notice. It is too fast for most. People in a state of anima possession can be observed in everyday life. Men whose manner and character shift dramatically around women, especially those they're attracted to, are under a degree of anima compulsion. Additionally, men who devote their life to relationships with women, Don Juans and Casanovas, utterly enraptured by the feminine, but at the complete detriment to other areas of life. In the modern world, the pickup artist or red pill community falls into this category. Their value system, to a large extent, is being determined by their inner anima. They don't know it, of course, and won't until they strike up contact with a much more complex nuance and powerful psychological force, the self. Alas, men who fall prey to the anima are not necessarily at fault because their relationship to the archetype is poor. It's because there are no real connections to the true self. In such a state, the ego is adrift in a nihilistic state and can easily fall prey to either archetypes or addiction, having lost the guiding North Star, which Jung calls the self or heart of a person. It just so happens that the anima probably exerts the dominant influence over such a person. The important thing to note is that this is an autonomous complex. A person under its influence will merely be compelled to do things. They may be drawn to certain careers and people by forces unknown to them. Reasoning with them or pointing this out is useless until a certain level of consciousness is reached. In a way, much of Jung's work is meant only for the analyst and not the patient until a certain stage in the relationship is reached. So that's about the anima. And who does this Don Juan character sound like to you? Prime Minister of Canada written all over it. So, on to animus possession, the opposite nature of the male in the female. Animus possession. Are you a ball-busting bitch? By Anja von Krellingen. Anima and Animus, Jungian Theories of Anima Animus, from Carl Gustav Jung in his fairy tales. In preparation for our Anima and Animus module, Anja writes, on Conscious Living program, I reread Mary Louise von Franz's book, Animus and Anima in Fairy Tales. This is again why these archetypes invariably pop up in fairy tales and why we find fairy tales so compelling, because they are speaking to our collective unconscious. Well, it is a fascinating read. I can't say that I enjoyed reading her, since her writing style is very difficult to follow. I decided to extract the invaluable information from Animus and Anima in fairy tales in 2 concise posts that explains the process of integrating the anima and the animus. This post, part 1 of 2, is the exploration of the integration of animus, and next month I will post one on the integration of the anima. Jung makes the following statement about the animus and anima. The soul which accrues the ego consciousness during the opus has a feminine character in the man and a masculine character in the woman. His anima wants to reconcile and unite. Her anima tries to discern and discriminate. That's from the Psychology of Transference in chapter 16, paragraph 522. In the classic version of Jungian psychology, the anima is a man's internal other, and the anima is the woman's internal other. In other words, if you are physically a woman, you will have an inner animus, a masculine image which guides and shapes the way you relate to men and the world at large. This is largely derived from the father of the woman, Marie-Louise von Franz does base her interpretation on fairy tales on this classical version of the anima and animus theory. So she goes on, but I'll get down to anima possession and what that looks like and why I'm convinced that this is what we're seeing in society at large. Now, animus possession is not the fault of women in society per se. It is the fault of both sexes that have failed to integrate their internal others. So it's just as much the fault of men who are anima possessed as it is the fault of women who are animus possessed. And the fact that we live in a welfare state that seeks to control and manipulate humanity rather than allowing people to do as Carl Jung insisted they must, individuate, is the reason why we're seeing such a pathologically, psychologically sick society. We all know at least one woman who has become possessed by her animus. She is a ball-busting bitch. These women walk around with stinkwood penises, beating both men and women over the head with it. Stinkwood is a very hard wood, by the way. Insisting they know it all and know all better than anyone else. This animus hound is never wrong. She knows everything. She inflicts an unstoppable, unconscious flow of talk on others, in which she has an unyielding conviction. So we see, the Karens of the world and the social justice warriors are manifesting this animus possession. The animus hound usually suffers from a weak and uncertain feminine image and a damaged instinct. Her mother was not available, either emotionally or physically. This makes her vulnerable to animus possession. This woman has a negative image about her femininity and is usually highly critical and judgmental of other women. She herself is vain, false, and jealous, but is not aware of it and projects it out, labeling others as vain, false, and jealous. The animus in this woman has one goal, and that is to pull her away from life and cut her off from it. He prevents this woman from entering a spiritual life and keeps her focused on the material physical world. She suffers from a will to power, a psychological imbalance which affects her relatedness to others and the world in the most insidious way. When the feeling life, the eros life, is missing, the result is someone who pursues and values only the intellect, resulting in a stiff attitude, lacking warmth and feeling. She has no heart. She's cut off from her instincts, unbalanced and destructive. She can only relate to men sexually, and when confronted with a relationship, she asks the wrong questions. Instead of thinking about whether she loves him or cares for him, she asks herself whether she should sleep with him now or try to work out the best way to manipulate him. The animus is critical and harsh, and he constantly whispers to the woman that she is a failure, that she can't amount to anything, and that it is too late now anyway. He criticizes those around her and points out their flaws and mistakes. The animus often attacks a woman's creativity by instilling doubt about the validity of her ideas and her ability to implement them. He also sows the seeds of doubt and suspicion. The animus loves getting stuck on small things and making it into big in order to hold back life and prevent growth. He is an expert on making mountains out of molehills. Right now, I drove my wife downtown to work. We're having this the biker rally today in Ottawa. The bikers coming in. I want to remind you folks that every Friday the 13th on that little village of Port Dover, thousands of bikers descend on that little town, and there's rarely any issues. And when they are, they're usually caused by the police not minding their own business and harassing people. Bikers aren't likely to cause any trouble, but you would to hear all the Karens of the world and our mayor crying, "Oh, alarm, alarm! Motorcycle riders, they might be manly." Ah! I can't stand this society. We are living in the most perverse and unnatural world. Like a dog with a bone, he picks and analyzes and comes up with various imitations of what's going on, wasting an enormous amount of psychic energy, which we're seeing right now. They've hired extra police to monitor bikers that are coming in to honor the National War Memorial. Furthermore, the woman craves life, and like the proverbial vampire, she will suck it from whoever, even her children, which is why children of the animus-possessed hound are left damaged. Being this woman is not easy. It is a hard and unforgiving existence. It is a dog-eat-dog world. And then she goes on to say how to immigrate the animus. We need to individuate in this society. We need to put control back in the hands of the sovereign individual. We need to be aware of our collective unconscious and the purpose of these archetypes. We need to pursue being the good king and the loving and kind mother, which of course my wife is, a very manifestation of the Mary archetype, and yet her children. I don't have words to describe the outcome of what happens in a society when the nuclear family breaks down and the traditional roles of men and women, which 6,000 years of recorded human history demonstrate are the most normal and healthy way for children to be raised. I don't have words to describe the damage being done by postmodernism and critical theory and people who are following these ideologies. They are wicked, and they need... I pray that God give me words so precise and so exact that they will surgically carve out these mind worms from those who have fallen prey to them. And I pray that something I say, some example I set, will encourage people to individuate and take up their cross and carry the burden of life nobly. God bless you all. Thank you for listening. I know this was a complicated one, but it was one that I felt that I needed to talk about because of the utter panic we see in modern society, where they go nuts over things that are normal and they laud things that are perverse. Have a great day.